Hi everyone, my name is Erna Sif Arnardóttir. Today we're going to talk about the sleep revolution, a project for which I'm very happy to tell you about, as I am the principal investigator for this project. And today is really a preparation for the practical session, where we're talking about the difference for patient-reported outcome measures and objective measurements, how things are currently done and how things can be done in a more in the future. So we're really talking about different classical and more novel approaches to sleep diagnostics and even sleep treatment, as we are seeing it in the Sleep Revolution project and in the near future. And we will be using some of the tools of the Sleep Revolution in this course as well. So this project, we got a €15 million grant from Horizon 2020 program. So it's a 4-year project from 2021 until 2025 with 39 partners all over Europe. So this is quite big, as you can imagine. We have a number of universities and hospitals. We have industry partners. We have expert societies, such as the European Sleep Research Society, which is a very important member to have, or partner to have. As you can imagine, for any of the research we do and we find has a clinical significance, that this can be then turned into some sort of standards for the future. And within the ESRS, we also have, this is the umbrella organization for the ANSS. This is the Assembly of National Sleep Societies. And all of the different countries in Europe have a National Sleep Society, which I do urge you to become a member of, if you aren't already. And within this, there are over 8,000 sleep professionals in Europe. So it's a great network that we can connect with and get their feedback on different parts of the grant. We are also supported by some other societies, such as the ERS and companies. Last but not least, we have the ESARA network. This is the European Sleep Apnea Database, which has been working together for many years now, collecting data in the same way. And 24 centers out of those in the network are working within the Sleep Revolution. We're both doing retrospective data collection, where we're getting some 10,000 recordings with patient characteristics. And we are also collecting data prospectively. I'll tell you more about that. Here you can see we are spread all over Europe, and this is very important. It can't be that you get a project of this size and you do all of the validation and research in one country, such as Iceland. You have to make sure that it works across Europe from north to south, east to west. So the overall aims of the Sleep Revolution are to transform the current diagnostic methods for sleep-disordered breathing, SDB. This is anything from habitual snoring to severe sleep apnea. We want to bring advanced sleep diagnostics from the hospital into the patient's home, promote participatory healthcare with technological solutions, and develop different personalized treatment options for SDB patients. And we have 2 of these treatments that we're looking at in the Sleep Revolution, and we hope to do more of this type of work in future grants. So first of all, as you went over in the sleep apnea part, the way we currently decide the severity of obstructive sleep apnea that someone has is really just we count events. So it doesn't matter if an apnea is 10 seconds or 2 minutes. If there is very small desaturation, the oxygen saturation is still always well above 90. Or as you see in patient 1, that there's a huge desaturation that follows this very long, like 2-minute apnea that is happening there. And at the moment, we just count these because we are still working as if we're on paper, instead of looking also at the length of the event and the severity of the event, such as the downstream effects like the desaturation. And we are looking into ways to connect these indices of OSA or SDB severity with clinical consequences, because at the moment the AHI is not well connected. And we are actually following this this perspective paper that was put out in 2018 from Randerath et al., where you look at, so we have 3 different axes where we're looking at the severity of OSA by. So to determine if someone has OSA in need of treatment and how acutely they need treatment. So first of all, you have axis A, where it says respiratory events. And here we want to not just look at the length of the events, but also apnea versus hypopnea, their length, snoring, upper airway, resistance, etc. So looking at all of the different things that classify the respiratory events and can differentiate between them. We also are really interested in the acute systemic effect, and this is axis E. And this includes then the hypoxic effects, arousals, the sleepiness the next day, and anything we can see in the recording as a downstream effect of the sleep apnea events. And finally, which can be more tricky to classify, and you need access to healthcare records, preferably longitudinal data, is to look at the chronic end organ impact. This would be, for example, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and other diseases that may be very much affected by the presence of OSA. So we are looking at all of these different axes, and we're using machine learning methodology and other signal processing analysis, looking at the raw sleep data from thousands of sleep recordings to be able to assess this. Another thing we really are looking quite closely at in the sleep revolution is the sleep stage scoring agreement, and also for any other scoring events. And now you have had some exposure to the scoring of sleep studies, and you may realize already that there is about 20% at least of sleep stage scoring where people are not agreeing on. And there are some events or some parts of the recordings where it's very clear that the patient is in deep sleep or, for example, REM sleep. But in other cases, it's not so clear. So what we did in the sleep revolution is we had 10 different expert sleep scorers. They'd all been scoring for many years. And we had all of them score the same study. And you can see here, this is a study from someone with a pretty good sleep pattern. And the agreement between the scorers, the mean agreement is 0.91, the Fleiss kappa is 0.8. There's actually pretty good agreement. But there are still places, and you remember it's always just 30 seconds at a time the person is scoring. And there are places that people are disagreeing. See, for example, score number 4, which scores wake for much shorter time than most of the other scorers. And then you can see on top here, you see a majority score and how the agreement changes depending on the different parts of the recording. And there's a lot of information in this because we also need to understand, why do people disagree? Is it a true gray area in the scoring where we don't really know if it is, for example, sleep stage 1 or sleep stage 2? Or can we clarify the rules so that we get better agreement between people? And it becomes trickier as the studies become more complicated, if the sleep is more fragmented, as is typical, of course, for many sleep disorders, such as obstructive sleep apnea. You can see here the mean agreement is only 0.8 and the Fleiss kappa 0.58, and that there is much less agreement in this study than in the other one. So this is really important, and at the moment we still, in most cases, people review manually all of the epochs of a study, both the areas where people are agreeing and where people are not agreeing. So in the sleep revolution, we have created a model that can show you these gray areas where people are not agreeing. And you can see here actually in this paper where we have the hypnodensity from 10 scorers and where they agree. For example, around the 200 mark, you can see that most people are agreeing that this is sleep stage 3, or all of them are agreeing in this particular study. While a little bit further down, around 300, you can see that there is disagreement whether a certain epoch is sleep stage 2 or REM. And we have a similar hypnodensity series when you look at the automatic ASAGA model. It's not identical to the disagreement between scorers, but it's quite similar. So basically what we're testing now in the ESADA study, where we have 24 centers all seeing patients, 1,000 patients in total, and they're all using this gray area for their scoring to see if we can make the manual review quicker. So we are only looking at areas of disagreement and not these areas where the automatic analysis and people in general are all in agreement. So basically what we're aiming to do is not just have artificial intelligence or machine learning where machines replace human processes and make decisions for us, and a human never looks at the recordings, but rather augmented intelligence, where we have the machines aiding our human processes, they suggest decisions for us, but in the end it's always a human that makes the final decision. And we believe this is extremely important because anyone who has ever done sleep scoring knows that in some cases there are some errors in the sleep study, there are some artifacts, and basically the automatic analysis goes haywire. And we really cannot have that happen when we're talking about patient data and treatment decisions based on that data. I've shown you this slide before in part 2, talking about how we can move the diagnostics from the hospital to the home. And here we're talking about this advanced type of diagnostic, which is then, instead of doing the type 1 gold study in the laboratory or the type 2 sleep study at home, and a professional sets everything up either in the hospital and sends you home, or a person actually comes into your home, as is done in some countries, but rather that you can place it on yourself. And this will, if this works, this is a huge reduction in costs and how much staff is needed around a single sleep study. It's also for research, meaning that we can do much more in-depth studies at home if people can self-apply it, as they do currently for type 3 and type 4 studies in many cases. So when we are assessing this, both for self-applied PSG then, and also when we're testing more other novel equipment, novel questionnaires, and our sleep app, which I'll tell you about a bit later, we're always wanting to know the patient experience and the research participant experience, because we want to use something called code design when we are designing anything new. And in this case, you have a template for a product or the prototype of a product. Often you start with not even having created anything, just writing it on a piece of paper, and you ask people what they think about it. So you ask the end users, the patients or research participants, as well as the healthcare professionals who are going to be using that particular product, and you get their feedback. And you do this around and around until you have a product that everybody is happy with. And this is extremely important if you think about, for example, most of the healthcare systems in the world were not designed like this. And if any of you have worked in a hospital, there's often a lot of frustration around the way these things are set up. So in this case, we're talking about a self-applied sleep study from one of our collaborators in the project, Knox Medical. And you can see here, this is one of our staff members who was nice enough to be in the photo, showing how this self-applied sleep study looks like. The main difference from a traditional PSG is that all of the electrodes to measure sleep on the head are on the forehead. You can't ask people to place electrodes, at least not currently, in their hair or by themselves. So we cannot have electrodes in the occipital and central regions. It's all in the frontal region. We also then don't have the reference electrode behind the ear, but rather use the electrodes that you can see there when you place them against each other. Also, there is no electrode on the chin, meaning that there's no EMG on the chin. This mainly causes problems then for the scoring of REM sleep, where you really need to be able to see the EMG and arousals in REM sleep. We are looking at the EMG from the forehead areas, but this is one of the limitations at the moment. We give this to people just in this box that you can see there on the far right, and people get an 8.5-minute video and a small template or brochure showing them how they can place everything on themselves. So there's never a staff person explaining anything, just giving them the device, and they handle it themselves. And we are now validating this in the 1,000 patients in the Asara, where they both have the traditional sleep study done in that center, either, for example, an in-lab PSG or the type 3 home study, and then they also get this study. And we're looking at their experience and how many people are able to place it on themselves. So we actually have these instructions now in 15 languages. We have done a pilot study, which is now published, where we looked at the feasibility and usability of doing 3 nights with this self-applied home polysomnography. And this is what we're testing also in this ASADA study. Everybody is doing this at home for 3 nights, and we're thinking here about night-to-night variability and the adaptation night that you get more used to having the equipment on. The vast majority of participants were able to put this on successfully in the pilot study, which was performed in Iceland. And you can also see here the time they estimated it took them to place the electrodes and set up the device was reduced greatly from night 1 to night 3. So by night 3, the majority of participants were able to do this within 15 minutes and almost all within 30 minutes. You can also see some improvement in their sleep, less wake after sleep onset, and better sleep efficiency. So they are getting more used to the devices. It's not enough to know that people can place it on themselves and that we get a recording that works. We also need to do a so-called double setup validation, where we do the traditional PSG with the setup on the frontal, occipital, and central leads, and we have the EMG on the chin, versus this more novel approach. So here is one of our PhD students, and he is wearing both devices. And we actually have done this now in over 100 children and 200 adults, where we looked at the difference in the signals, whether you have on the new approach and the older approach. And we've also been looking at what difference in scoring you see, so when an expert is scoring the signals. And overall, the signals look quite similar. There is a decrease in the amplitude of the EEG when you have it only frontally, and then you need to make adjustments to the scoring rules for this change. But overall, the results are coming out quite well. In this project, we are using the focus of something called P4 medicine, where we want to be able to predict disease and consequences of disease, such as obstructive sleep apnea. We want to be able to prevent it and get to people earlier. So not as it is now very often, unfortunately, that people are coming in their 50s or 60s with very severe sleep apnea. They are already obese and with a lot of comorbidities, and then we are giving them a CPAP machine. And we think, if you think how much better it would be if we could capture some of these people earlier on, for example, in their early 40s, and help them get off this pathway towards more and more severe disease and likely more obesity as well. We also need to personalize both the diagnostics and the treatment for sleep apnea, and we will discuss this in the classroom. And we need to have participatory medicine, so that you can have more active participation of the patients in their own treatment schemes. So in the study, we are collecting a lot of patient data. As I said, some tens of thousands of recordings, sleep recordings where we have the raw data and their health information, so that we can get novel information that connects more to clinical consequences. We are automating as much of this as we can with big data analysis, a lot of different machine learning approaches, but we are also doing a lot of verifications and validations of these approaches by manual scoring. And we are using a lot of digital technology, wearable technology, to see how much we can rely on these things. There's a lot of benefit for the future if we can do long-term analysis with this type of wearable technology, as we talked about in an earlier lecture. We have a digital platform, which I'm going to show you a bit about, so that we can really assess people's subjective and objective well-being, both when they are undiagnosed with a disease and through the course of treatment. For example, monitoring people for 3 months, which is what we're doing in the Sleep Revolution project. So we have developed an app in the Sleep Revolution, and here we have the consensus sleep diary that was developed for paper, and we have transformed this into an online possibility. So you have it in the app, you get notifications in the morning and in the evening, and you can change the timing of these. And we can see when you logged a certain answer, so you cannot go a week later and add in a certain entry. And we can also make the experience simpler for you. For example, if you never take prescription medicine to help you sleep, you can tick that here in the onboarding, and then you never have to answer that question, because we're asking people to answer this daily for 3 months. And this is a lot of patient burden, of course. From these studies and all of the data we get from the sleep revolution, we also hope to be able to simplify the diary and remove questions that are perhaps redundant or do not give us a lot of information. In the app, we also have this very novel cognitive games, or brain games as we call it for the patients. This is really to assess cognitive function. We have 4 different games in the app. Flexibility game, the reaction game, which is really the psychomotor vigilance test, memory game, this is the Stroop, and perception game. So here we can, instead of having people coming in for a cognitive function assessment, which is, again, something that requires a lot of staff. It takes a lot of time, so it's quite expensive to be able to do this. And if we can do this at home, with, like in this case, 1,000 patients, this is extremely valuable for research in the future. And in this case, we have been validating these 3-minute versions of these 4 tests against this more typical in-laboratory cognitive function assessment. And here's an example of one of the notifications, because of course it's very important that we are encouraging people to use the app. And we've also used this co-design in the app, and it has undergone a number of changes based on people's feedback, how we can improve it. We have also been creating a new questionnaire. We call it the European Sleep Questionnaire. There's a prototype of this that is now ready. This was led by our team, Dirk Pervenacci and his team at UGent in Belgium. And as I have discussed previously with you, there's no one sleep questionnaire that encompasses everything you need to know about a person's sleep profile. And this was our aim for this questionnaire, that you can have one questionnaire that really gives you all of the information you need, so that you can decide on a person with a sleep issue, which type of studies they may need, what type of treatment, etc. And we have done this all digitally as well. So the patient and participants do all of this online. When we have received all of the answers, then we can show it to people we can visualize it in a nice way, both for the research participant and patients, with the information they need and make sense for them to see. And similarly, you can have a different visualization for the healthcare professional, so that they know, for example, if a patient has a lot of issues with sleepiness, falling asleep at the wheel, that you need to get them into treatment very quickly. And you can see here, for example, in C, how different symptoms have changed from before treatment to after treatment. So you can really visualize just very quickly if the patient is showing the needed improvement or not with the treatment you're giving them, and whether you may need to do some changes or not. Finally, we are looking at different personalized treatment options. Again, there are definitely more treatment options out there. Of course, myofunctional, we're using here myofunctional therapy. This is quite novel, where we are training the muscles of the upper airway. And in the last one, there is a lifestyle study. Well, hopefully we can discuss both of these treatments and the papers that are coming out of this in some of the practicals. But these are 2 very exciting options for treatment, especially if you're able to catch people relatively early in their disease progression. So mild to moderate sleep apnea, people who are willing to be active and do an active treatment approach, because this both requires that you are doing a lot of exercises on a regular basis for long term. And there are, of course, other options that are out there, upper airway surgery, the mandibular advancement device, etc., that also need further studying. Here's an example of the way we can do treatment in the app. So here's an example of treatment delivery using our app. where people are doing myofunctional exercises and they can follow the person on the screen so that they can do the exercise correctly every time. So to summarize, in the sleep revolution, what we are aiming to do is to move the field from a single night sleep recording in the laboratory or a simplified version at home to a multi-night sleep recording that is actually measuring sleep and looking at what we can do with long-term monitoring with all of this new technology, wearables and an app. We are looking at how we can move from manually scoring every epoch of the sleep study to a more machine-learned based scoring, still with a human in charge. We are looking at moving the diagnosis of OSA to the currently very simplified AHI and sleepiness evaluation that is typically done. If an AHI is 15 or more and your Epworth sleepiness scale is over 10, that you have sleep apnea. But rather looking at more different phenotypes and more correlations, capturing the patient data and the most pertinent data for them to see if they need treatment and how they're responding to treatment. With this instant and accessible feedback to patients as well, for the information that they need. And this can also work to motivate the patient. So for the follow-up, currently in many places we are not able to do any follow-up with the patient him or herself. It's only from the CPAP device that you are seeing if the patient is using it, if there's a leak, etc. And this is of course great, but we also would really need to know if the patient is feeling better, if there are some issues, that's why they're not using their treatment. And here again, the technology can help us a lot. So thank you very much for your attention. Here we can see we had this general assembly of the sleep revolution where almost all of the partners came to Iceland for a meeting. We meet once a year, and we of course have a lot more contact throughout the year, but we have a physical meeting once a year. And this QR code is for the overall sleep revolution paper, which I recommend that you read. So thank you very much.